Well, what I've got up here this morning is a pair of Apple headphones. My son bought these for me last Christmas a couple of years ago, and they're very nice. In fact, they're specifically called AirPod Max wireless over-the-ear headphones with noise cancellation. At least that's what the box said. I love music, all kinds of music, and I love putting these things on and just kind of immersing myself, because it really does immerse you in the music. And I especially like the feature of noise cancellation. I can put these on, push this little button right here, and I hear you just fine. It's like I don't even have any headphones on. But when I push this little button on the front part here just once, it's silent. All I hear is my voice right now. I can't hear anything. It's great. Especially when we're traveling in the airplane, I try to charge these things up and take them with me, because when we get on the airplane, I can put these babies on and I can turn that noise cancellation on. I can't hear a thing. I can't even hear Dee Dee right next in the seat next to me. Now, I'm not going to say whether that's good or bad, but anyways, when those jet engines start up, you hear a very, very faint. Actually, you feel it more than you hear it. But push that button, everything goes away, and I can either sleep or I can listen to my own music. When we're driving in the car, I love to take them, because sometimes if we're going on a long trip and Dee Dee's driving and she's got her K-Love radio blasting, and nothing wrong with K-Love it, but if I want a little bit of silence, I can put these things on. I can push that little button. All the noise is canceled. I'm in my own little world, and I can lay my head on a pillow and sleep, or I can listen to my own music. They're great. So I thought these would be useful to help illustrate something about the sermon this morning, the topic that we're going to be looking at, to sort of illustrate where we are here in 21st century American culture when we start talking about the topic that we're talking about this morning. We're going through this Ecclesiastes series, and I've got it right here on the top of my notes here. Part 8. We're in Part 8 this morning. Going through the book of Ecclesiastes, and we're going to hit a topic this morning that's an exciting, thrilling, joyful topic. All right, you're going to pick up on it in verses 1 through 4 here in chapter 9. Here we go. King Solomon says, "This too I carefully explored. Even though the actions of godly and wise people are in God's hand, no one knows whether God will show them favor." I'm reading from the New Living Translation. By the way, I've been using a lot from the New Living Translation in this series, because it sort of helps us understand a little bit more the sense of what's being said here. But he goes on and he says in verse 2, "The same destiny ultimately awaits everyone, whether righteous or wicked, good or bad, ceremonially clean or unclean, religious or irreligious. Good people receive the same treatment as sinners, and people who make promises to God are treated like people who don't. It seems so wrong that everyone under the sun suffers the same fate. Already twisted by evil, people choose their own mad course, for they have no hope." And here it is, "There is nothing ahead but death anyways." There's our topic. There's our exciting, thrilling, joyful topic this morning. Everybody's going to die. There is hope only for the living, as they say. And King Solomon pulls in evidently a little slang thing that had been going around that he was familiar with. It's better to be a live dog than a dead lion. You see, I told you, I didn't make that up. There it is, right there. Now, why is a live dog better than a dead lion? Well, it's very simple. One's alive and the other's dead. Even though now in first century Ancient Near East, a dog, for whatever reason, we love our dogs, right? I got my chocolate lab buddy. I love my dog. But in the ancient Near East in the first century, dogs were the lowest of the lowest. They were despised animals. Nobody cared for dogs. But a lion, man, that was the noble. It was the king of the jungle. He was noble. But a live dog is better than a dead lion. Why? Because if you're dead, who cares? Our theme this morning is death. And here's what typically happens in our modern 21st century American culture when we go down that path and start talking about death. What? I can't hear you laughing. I can't hear you. I don't want to talk about that subject. I don't want to go down that path. I want to talk about everything else. We cancel one another out. Don't want to talk about that subject. Don't want to touch on that subject. No, I don't want to go there. We live in such a youth-focused culture that desperately tries to stay away from that topic. Now, this demographic we live in here in the villages, you go down there to any one of these squares on any given night, and you'll see that's the last thing being thought about is death. Unless in the midst of your dancing, you trip and you fall and you get hurt real bad. But we live in a youth-focused culture that desperately tries to stay away from that topic. Don't want to talk about it. If you go down that path, I'm just going to push my button. I'm going to cancel you out. I'm going to turn on the noise cancellation so I can't hear you. You see, if you are living life under the sun and you got nothing to look forward to beyond life, living becomes everything, right? It becomes everything. So who wants to talk about death if you got nothing to look forward to when that happens? Who wants to glorify getting old and slow and wrinkled? And I'll get myself in trouble here. To be eternally youthful is the goal everybody wants to pursue at all costs, because, after all, that's when you're in the prime of life. That's when you are virile and strong and mentally alert and invincible and independent and self-assertive and fully alive. We're in your younger years. We'll do anything, pay any price, go through any surgery, embrace any kind of diet, take any kind of supplements, engage in any kind of exercise regimen, all for the goal of putting off old age and death, slowing down the aging process. Bobby Jamieson wrote a commentary on Ecclesiastes, and he says there, and I think he's spot on, he says, quote, "Death has come to replace sex as the ultimate unmentionable." It used to be in the old days, no one talked about sex. No one said that word, let alone describe it and talk about it like we do today on the TV and at the movies and the magazines and on the websites and all of that. But hey, talk about death? No, I'm gonna cancel you out. Don't want to talk about it. But here's what King Solomon was forced to admit. After attempting to live under the sun, as we've been looking at in Ecclesiastes, living under the sun without God, as though God were not a part of life. And when you live that kind of life, you know that embraces the philosophy, live like there's no tomorrow. Live like death is not a part of things. I mean, suck all of life. You can, get it, live it to the fullest. And King Solomon, as well as all of us, have to realize, have to admit, that you and I don't have a clue what tomorrow will bring, do we? We don't have a clue what tomorrow will bring. I remember talking to a man, lived in one of the local communities here, about giving his life to Christ and being baptized into Christ. And his family wasn't baptized, so why did he need to? And he had time and all of that. And I'd met with him about 3 times. The last time I met with him was an afternoon over at his house. And the next morning, I got a call from one of our deacons who lived in his neighborhood. Said they had found him on his bed in his bedroom, dead. He had died during the night. You and I don't have a clue what tomorrow will bring. And the scariest thing about that is not only do we not know what tomorrow will bring, you and I have absolutely no control over what tomorrow will bring. Tomorrow could bring the Grim Reaper knocking on your front door, for all we know, for all you know. King Solomon says there's an evil in all that is done under the sun. This he hated. He didn't like this. He didn't like talking about it. He didn't like thinking about it. He says it doesn't matter if you're among the righteous or the wicked. It doesn't matter if you are good or bad, regardless of what Santa Claus knows or doesn't know. If you've tried to live a morally pure life, or if your life is morally soiled, just like all of our lives are. If you've been religious or if you are unreligious, it doesn't matter. There's nothing ahead for you but death. We're all going to die. Wow. There, you came to church for something motivational and positive, right? I don't know if y'all seen What About Bob, one of my favorite movies, but there's a scene where he's staying overnight, and their young son of this family, he's trying to become friends with. They're laying there and they're just talking before they go to sleep, and this little 10-year-old kid, he says, "You know what? It's all quiet. They're about to fall asleep. They've been joking around and everything." He says, "You know what?" And he says, "What?" "We're all going to die." It's true. Death doesn't call us up on the phone. Ring, ring, ring. And then you answer the phone and death says, "Hey, is it convenient if I come calling on you today? Or would you like to put it off just a little bit?" Duh. Let's put it off. It doesn't call you back and ask if you'd like for death to show up at a later date. King Solomon goes on and he becomes a little bit fatalistic in verses 11 and 12 of chapter 9. Here's what he says. "Again, I saw that under the sun, the race is not to the swift." Well, usually it is, isn't it? The race usually goes to the swiftest one among the lot who's racing, but he says, The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to those with knowledge, but time and chance happen to them all. For a man doesn't know his time. We don't know when that time is going to come. Like fish that are taken in an evil net. Fish don't swim around waiting for a net to show up and then swim into it. It catches them off guard. And like birds that are caught in a snare, so the children of man are snared at an evil time, at the wrong time, at a bad time, when it suddenly falls upon them. So there's something we need to realize when we're looking at King Solomon's seemingly fatalistic outlook on life, though. There's something we need to understand as we approach this book and this topic especially, and what Solomon is telling us here. We need to understand something. It's important for us to interpret what we're reading correctly. King Solomon wasn't privy to God's complete revelation. What was to come later? As far as King Solomon knew from his position in life and what he knew, all he knew was that the end comes, it's called death. There's this place, there's the abode of the dead. Sheol is the Hebrew word that is used in the Old Testament that simply meant, didn't have any necessarily bad or good implications. It was just this place that the Old Testament folks knew where you go when you're dead. You died, there you are. You're in this place where the dead are, called Sheol. And King Solomon wasn't privy to further revelation that was given. God, you see, has chosen to reveal himself through history incrementally and in ways and at various times and through different methodologies in keeping with his divine program of redemption. And so in biblical studies, this is called progressive revelation. Revelation becomes clearer and more full as time progresses until it gets to who? Notice I said who? Jesus, who is the fullest and final revelation of God, who allowed us to see who God is, what he's like, that he's full of grace and truth. So it's progressive revelation. King Solomon didn't have the clarity in regard to the afterlife that Jesus later brought to the people of his time. He didn't have access to the final revelation of the Messiah that we now have and can look back on the New Testament and the revelation of Jesus Christ and see more clearly what God's intents for us are and what comes after life. In fact, the Hebrew writer in the New Testament in chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, makes this very point. He says in Hebrews 1, verses 1 and 2, long ago, at many times, that's back in King Solomon's days and the Old Testament days, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. And we know when you go back in looking at prophecy in the Old Testament, sometimes it's difficult to see understand what's being said clearly. You have to really work it hard at trying to interpret all of that. But in these last days, from the perspective of the Hebrew writer, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. So the seemingly fatalistic viewpoint of life that King Solomon is operating from here in Ecclesiastes, made worse by his attempts to live life and record it for us to see as though he didn't exist, really didn't allow him to see much beyond death. What it looked like, what it was going to be like, what was waiting there. But what he could see was the tension that exists between life and death. That tension that constantly is hounding us. I want to live the best life I can. I want to enjoy life, but I know death is coming, and there's that tension. You never know when it's going to come, but it will come. But even though, in light of that tension, King Solomon refuses to give up and to quit living. He doesn't just roll over and say, oh, well, we're all going to die. I'll just roll over and wait for it to happen. Just this last week, I was having a conversation with our discipleship minister, Tom Beckner, and he used a phrase in our conversation the other day that I think applies here with what King Solomon seems to be trying to say. Tom's a smart guy. You know, he's got his PhD. He comes up with some smart stuff once in a while. Here's one of them. He'll be in the next service. Here's what he said, quote, wherever you are, there you are. Now that's PhD stuff right there, isn't it? Wherever you are, there you are. And here's what he meant by that. Wherever you happen to be, there you are in the present moment. And many of those times, as we relate it to what King Solomon says, many of those times, wherever you are, there you are, many of those times, God drops those little gifts of grace into your life. And what I think Tom meant, and what I think King Solomon means, is make the most of it. Wherever you are, there you are. And when there you are happens to be a great moment where God gifts you with a gift of grace or love or whatever, take it. Make the most of it. Here's how King Solomon says it in verses 7 and 8. So go ahead, eat your food with joy, and drink your wine with a happy heart, for God approves of this. Wear fine clothes with a splash of cologne. Live happily with the woman you love. Now that's great, that's positive, but here's the tension between these good things in life and then death coming here. Live happily with the woman you love through all the meaningless, vain, absurd days of life that God has given you under the sun. The wife God gives you is your reward for all your earthly toil. Whatever you do, do it well. For when you go to the grave, here's the tension. For when you go to the grave, there will be no work, no planning, no knowledge, no wisdom. From King Solomon's perspective, that's all he could see. So he says, in this Latin phrase I used a couple weeks ago that occur throughout the book, carpe diem, seize the day. Seize the day. Suck all the good out of those moments that God gifts you with in life while you can, because King Solomon says in verse 12, none of us knows our time. None of us knows our time. So let me quickly leave you with 3 things King Solomon encourages us to do instead of just give up and wait for the inevitable. These 3 things God approves of, he says. Number 1, take care of yourself. That's in verses 7 and 8. Take care of yourself. Go ahead, eat your food with joy. Drink your wine with a happy heart. God approves of this. Wear fine clothes with a splash of cologne. Take care of yourself. God has given you this life that you have. Take advantage of it. Enjoy it. That this life that he has gifted us with is to be a stewardship that we use properly and use as best we can. We should value life, make something of life, and most of all, seek to model our lives after the Creator in whose image we've been created. There's no better way to do that than to embrace and follow Jesus, who said, "The thief has come only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it more abundantly." See, there's where we come in this latter revelation, looking back at the New Testament, the life of Jesus and his death, burial, and resurrection. We know where we can find true life, abundant life. Take care of yourself. Secondly, verse 9 there, find joy in your family. Find joy in your family. These days with my mom over in Mount Dora in memory care, struggling to remember who's who in the family, with my dad just having turned 92 and slowing down a bit, but still doing pretty good, with Dee Dee's mom having recently moved in with us, and now we've become caretakers of Dee Dee's mom, who's living with us now, with Mandy, our youngest daughter, and her husband now expecting their first child. By the way, last Sunday afternoon we had a gender reveal. It's a girl. We're excited about that. And after having just spent a week last week with our 3 grandchildren, and having spent 45 years with a wife I could never imagine God would bless me with, I find myself more and more getting sentimental about life. And trying to look at it, especially since going through this series of Ecclesiastes, trying to look at it and taking all of it in and sucking all the good out of it that I can get. Because God has blessed me. Cherish every moment with your family and with your friends God has given you, and thank Him for them. Lastly, thirdly, verse 10, do well whatever your hands find to do. Now it's interesting, the Apostle Paul almost said the same thing. Up in Colossians chapter 3, verse 17, here's what he says. And whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through Him. And there you go. There you go. There are the 3 things that Solomon says. Don't just lay down and die. Death is coming. No one's going to be able to circumvent it. No one's going to be able to bypass it. It's coming. But listen, take care of yourself. It's a gift from God. Find joy in your family. It's a gift from God. Do well whatever your hands find to do. Why? Because life is a gift from God. As we finish here this morning, I hope and I pray that all of us here this morning know the abundant life through Jesus Christ. But if you don't, when Michael sings the hymn of invitation, two of our elders are going to be down here, and I and the other ministers will be more than happy to stay after the service and talk to you about what it means to experience that abundant life in Jesus Christ. Maybe the Holy Spirit is drawing you to Him this morning. We're going to pray, and then Michael's going to lead us in that song. And if you have a decision to make, then would be the time to make it. Come down here and talk to these guys. Let's pray. Thank you, Father, for the amazing way that you can bring to us this